Hey y'all, my name is Erin and welcome back to my channel. I am so glad that you guys are here today. Today we are going to be talking about the books that I read this January. And y'all, I had a pretty good reading month. All right, so let's get started with my stats for the month. Let's see, I read 7 books and 2,802 pages, not too shabby. And I love seeing all the colors for different moods that I read. I think this is the most colors I've seen in 1 month, so that's exciting. Let's see, 43% of what I read was fast-paced and 57% was medium-paced. 14% was under 300 pages and 86% was between 300 and 499 pages. I only read fiction for the month of January. Shocker, but that's gonna change this month, I swear. 4 of the books I read were fantasy, 3 were young adult, 3 were romance, 2 were mystery, and then 1 each of classics, thriller, and literary fiction. I listened to 47.97 hours of audio and I read 1,210 pages in print. And of those 7 books, I rated 1 3 stars, 1 3.25 stars, 1 3.5 stars, 1 4 stars, and y'all, I am happy to say that I had 3 5-star reads for the month of January. So if you've watched any of my wrap-up videos in the past, you know that I'm just going to share some of the books that I read and the rating, and then I'm going to share my biggest disappointment and my biggest delight of the month. So these books are not in any type of particular order, but I'm going to start out with one of my favorite books that I started out with this year. It was a reread for me, and it's one of my favorite books of all time, and I think everyone should read this book, and that is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Y'all, I know I'm butchering that. I cannot say it. Paulo Coelho. Hold please.
Paulo Coelho.
All right, so The Alchemist is an allegorical tale and it really is full of so much beautiful symbolism. It's one of my favorite books of all time for that reason. And if you are someone who loves to go within and look at your own life and the choices that you're making, then this is a great book. It is beautifully written. So in this story, we follow Santiago, who is an Andalusian shepherd in Spain, and he wants more. He ends up having this dream and then follows the symbolism of the dream and ends up on this journey to find treasure at the pyramid. And that's all I want to tell you guys because I don't want to spoil anything. So if you want a spiritual book that's also fiction, it's going to encourage you to reflect on your life, I think you would really love this book. I give this 5 stars. I will read this every single year. I will die on this hill. It is one of my favorite books. All right, next up I read A Touch of Darkness, which is the first book in the Hades and Persephone series, and I love mythology, and this is a dark romance following Persephone. She is living in the modern world, but there are still gods, which I thought that was a really fun aspect. She's in college and she's doing her internship at a newspaper. Persephone ends up meeting Hades and making a bet with him, and the story kind of goes from there. So I love this. I gave it 3.5 stars. I'm planning on reading further into the series. Some of the books are from Persephone's point of view and some of the books are from Hades' point of view. So I'm hoping to get to the second one soon, but if you're following along, you know that I am not that great at moving on with series right now and I want to be better. That is one of my goals for 2024. But speaking of series, I guess I shouldn't say that I'm terrible at it because I did just finish reading the Inheritance Game series. I finished the last book that is out right now, and that is the Brothers Hawthorne. Y'all, I love this series. I'm not going to talk about it in depth because I feel it's been talked to death. So in this 4th installment, we follow 2 of the brothers, Jameson and Grayson, as they go on 2 different adventures. I did not love that we didn't get much of the other 2 brothers. I thought it was going to be about each of the brothers, but it was really only about the 2 brothers. That being said, I still really enjoyed the story. It's not my favorite of the 4. I gave this one 4 stars, and I think the other ones I gave maybe like 5 stars and 4.5 stars, but it was still a great read. It was a great way to wrap up. I do think she has a spin-off series coming out next summer, all about the Inheritance Games and how Avery continues the legacy. So I'm really excited about that. Need to pre-order. Next up, we have a book that is really popular right now. I've been seeing a lot of people read this, and it's one that I probably wouldn't have picked up other than my local book club was reading it for the month of January, and that is the dark rom-com Butcher and Blackbird by Bren Weaver. Y'all, I know this may be controversial, but I did not love this book. I ended up giving it 3 stars, and honestly, I think that was a little bit generous. If I could go back, I'd probably give it maybe 2.5 stars. I think this book was just not for me, but it might be for you. I thought the premise of the story was really unique. I loved the show Dexter. So the idea of serial killers who were killing other serial killers really appealed to me, and that they fall in love. I thought that's gonna be really cute. I really enjoyed the first maybe 25 or 30% of the story where Rowan and, oh my gosh, what's her name? What is her name? Oh my gosh, Sloane. When Rowan and Sloane met and their initial banter back and forth and also their quest going to kill different people. I really enjoyed that. Even though some parts were pretty disgusting, you should probably read the trigger warnings if you are easily grossed out. I mean, there were parts of this I was like, ooh, ooh, ooh. That being said, there were some things that just didn't work for me in this story. First of all, I didn't really love how their backstory wasn't really fleshed out. We obviously know they have been through trauma, but it was really skimmed over, and especially Sloane, the female main character in this story, we did not get really what happened to her. Why is she the way she is? So it honestly made it hard for me to care about the characters. I could say I really didn't care about these characters. I'm sorry. The second thing that really bugged me was Rowan's character. So in this book, we don't get an exact age of our characters, but I'm assuming they're around 30 based off of some references in the book, like when Rowan opened his restaurant, and we know that Sloane has been in her career for a while and she's very respected. So I'm gonna assume that these guys are at least 30. With that being said, there are some scenes where Rowan specifically is with his brothers, one who is an older brother and one who's a younger brother. And guys, I felt like I was reading about some 18-year-old frat boys. The way that they were speaking to each other in the dialogue, like they were calling each other dipshits. And it was just like, I just could not. I could not with the dialogue. It was not for me. Also, curse words in themselves do not bother me in books. Like, are they there for a reason? What are we learning about the characters through this? But in this story, it just felt overdone, irked me in this book. With all that being said, the characters just read really young for what I think their age was supposed to be. So when we get to the point where there are all these smutty scenes, it just felt like very icky to me. I do think that the premise was very interesting. It really did pick up towards the end. And if you really like dark romances and you don't mind a little fluff, then this really might be for you. But it wasn't for me. I will say I am actually kind of interested in the next book in this series. It's going to follow Sloane's best friend and one of Rowan's brothers. I think it's going to be some type of like marriage of convenience, but they hate each other. I'm not really sure, but it does sound interesting. I might pick up the second book in this series. We'll see. But honestly, I just think this type of book was not for me. So the next book I read was None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. And I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. And it was one of the most well done audiobooks that I think I've ever listened to. So we follow this woman, Alex Summers, and she's a podcaster, and she ends up interviewing her birthday twin, a woman named Josie, who is a little bit of an oddball. One thing I really loved was the podcast format of the book. We actually have a Netflix show talking about the podcast, so it lent itself really well to audio. So if you love audiobooks, I think you would really love listening to this one on audio. Honestly, it just really had me turning the pages. I was like, who is lying? Who is telling the truth? I think I listened to it in definitely less than 48 hours, and it's a pretty long audiobook. If you love thrillers and you have not read None of This Is True yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Go and read this. I loved it. 5 stars. Yes. Next up is my biggest disappointment from January, and that was unfortunately A Winter's Promise by Christelle Davos. I had been really excited about this book. I haven't seen it talked about a lot on YouTube, but the people that I have seen talked about this, I really respect their opinions, and so I thought that I was gonna love this book. I ended up giving it 3.25 stars, which I know is not a terrible rating, but I had such high hopes for it that it just ended up being a letdown. This is a YA fantasy, And it follows Ophelia, and the world that she lives in is extremely unique. Basically, the world was all one at one point, and then there was some type of explosion or something of that nature, and the world was blown to pieces. And so people live on these different like islands in the sky that they call arcs. I thought that that was extremely interesting, and I also thought that the magic system within this book was like nothing I had ever read before. Ophelia is a reader, so she can like hold objects in her hand and see what has happened to them and what the emotions were from the people who maybe handled the objects in the past. She can also travel through mirrors, which is so cool. The first 100 pages of this book, I was flying through. I was like, oh, this is going to be a 5-star read for me. I thought it was so interesting. So the premise of this book is that Ophelia is being forced to marry a man from another arc. And in that arc, it is a very different world. It is very violent. It is very cold. And she is forced to go there with her great aunt as a chaperone. Pretty much once Ophelia gets to the other arc, I just started losing interest. First of all, I just thought the plot ended up kind of getting pretty slow. I kept waiting for something to happen. I ended up listening to the second half of this book on audio, and when it ended, I was like, what? That's the end? Like, nothing happened. I kept waiting and nothing happened. I also really didn't love any of the characters. I didn't connect with them. I thought that the man that she was going to marry was extremely boring. I didn't get anything from him. I don't know if that makes sense. You know, when you just like don't connect with any of the characters. And all of the people on the arc that she was at, there were very few likable characters, maybe one, and we don't really get to know that person. And even Ophelia herself, I thought was pretty boring, if I'm really honest. The last thing that just really kind of bugged me is that when this story is opening, it's actually set up as a very matriarchal society. So with that being said, it felt very confusing when they decided to marry Ophelia off to a man on another arc, and they were basically telling her like, you just need to do what your husband says. It like felt very like unmatriarchal. It felt very patriarchal. Like as we went along in the story, that's kind of just what I noticed. I was like, this is a very patriarchal society. Like, I don't know why it's being called matriarchal. The whole pacing and tone just seemed to be off for a YA fantasy. There were some heavier topics that I felt were kind of just like glossed over, yet Ophelia read very young. It just didn't hit the mark for me. Something was just off about this book for me. I will say I loved the writing style of this book, and so I think I might continue it. I haven't decided yet. I may try out the second book and see if it gets better, or maybe see if some of the things that I didn't love are rectified in the second book. But overall, I was just expecting a lot from this book, and it really let me down. So enough about my disappointment. Let's get to my delight of the month. This was the first book that I read in 2024, and I am so happy because it ended up being a 5-star read for me. And that was Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I absolutely ate this book up. I was like a giggly little schoolgirl. This book was just gripping and I could not put it down. So in this story, we follow Kai and Peyton, and I absolutely love their dynamic. They live in this kingdom where there are elites and ordinaries, and elites have special powers and ordinaries do not. And ordinaries have actually been exiled from this land. Kai's job is actually to find people who are living there illegally and to hunt them and to kill them. Peyton is an ordinary, and she is pretending to be an elite. She's developed like her skills over time so that she can survive. And they end up coming together through some different circumstances. Let me just tell you, their banter and their tension is just, it is everything. So I was racing through this book, but then towards the end, I was like, oh my God, I don't want this book to end. Maybe I can just like read a little bit here and a little bit there. I was trying to pace it throughout the day just so that I wouldn't finish it. That's how much I loved this story. Honestly, there are just so many cute quotes like all throughout this story. I was going through, I was tabbing, I was highlighting. I don't know if you guys can see it there. I would say that if you enjoyed the Hunger Games, you will enjoy this book. I'm so excited because Lauren Roberts just announced that she's releasing a novella, I believe this April, following one of the side characters in this story. So I'm so excited, and I will be pre-ordering the second book in this series that does come out in, I think, July? Yeah, comes out in July. All right, you guys, those were all of the books that I read in January. I would love to hear what you read in January. Have you read any of the books that I read, and what did you think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? If you haven't yet, I would love for you to like and subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you guys later. Bye.